Hello and welcome to the Fintech Finance Virtual Arena. I'm your host, Doug McKenzie. And on today's session, we're actually going to be looking at how financial services are going to evolve and what role cloud technology is going to play in that evolution. And joining me today, I have three guys who are really placed right at the heart of that and right at the heart of financial services. And I think the best way to kick things off is if I ask you guys to kind of introduce yourselves. So if I could start off with Chris Thacker over at Mojo Mortgages. Chris, thank you so much for joining us here today. How are you doing?
Yeah, no, I'm good. Cheers, and thanks for inviting me.
Amazing. Well, Chris, can I ask, to inform our audience, can you give us a bit of background to your role and Mojo, please?
Yeah, so I'm CTO here at Mojo Mortgages. I actually only joined in March, and previous to that, I was head of engineering for insurance and home services at Money Supermarket. So Mojo is a digital, mortgage broker. So you come to us and we try and get you the best deal that we can. It's free. It's all about us really kind of trying to disrupt the mortgage industry. That's I think we can all agree is ripe for disruption and needs changing and updating.
I definitely think so. I'm glad to have you on the panel. Thank you so much, Chris. And also we have Wayne Freeman from Mettle. Wayne, how are you doing?
I'm very well, thanks, Doug. And thanks for inviting me as well.
It's an absolute pleasure. Wayne, could you also give our audience a bit of background to yourself and Mettle, please?
So like Chris, I'm a Chief Technology Officer, but for Mettle by NatWest. I guess prior to joining NatWest, joining Mettle in November 19, I've held senior leadership roles at Amazon, Capital One and World Remit. On Mettle, more importantly, we launched in 2018 and are a free digital banking account by NatWest to help the smallest of small businesses start, run and grow. It's built for the growing passion economy, which we're seeing now more and more, which consists of the small businesses, startups, self-employed individuals and sole traders. And I think importantly for us, Mettle's position inside NatWest Innovation Arm gives us the best of both worlds. We attempt to operate like a startup with our ways of working, our structure, but we leverage the very best elements of being part of the NatWest experience.
That's absolutely incredible. I'm so excited to kind of hear that duality from you, Wayne, during the conversation of that approach. And last but not least, we have Paulo Machado from Hyve. Paulo, thank you so much for joining. How are you as well?
Oh, great, thank you. And again, thanks for having me on the panel.
Well, Paulo, could you also lead us into kind of what Hyve do and your role there, please?
Yeah, so if I start with myself, background is primarily in tech recruitment and within the leisure industry. I've been with Hyve now for about 5 years or so. I lead a team of cloud specialists here at Hyve, predominantly responsible for helping customers with the digital strategies rolled out across multiple global locations. And also while working closely with a lot of Hyve's key customers, I'm also responsible for growing our global revenue within the business by working with a number of new prospects. And one of the biggest initiatives that I pursue in my role is obviously a cloud-first approach for all customers looking to adopt digital projects within the cloud space. Hyve is a company, we're UK-based. We're a leading provider with multiple locations across the globe. We're actually 20 this year, which is obviously a great feat. And also we partner with a number of industry-leading tech providers like VMware, the likes of Equinix, who we deploy all our sort of private cloud infrastructure into across the world. And with that, deliver mission-critical private cloud, enterprise cloud, allocation, and a variety of security services as well. We work with some big name brands like the NHS, Capita, LG, and so on and so forth. Really.
Excellent. Well, thank you guys for joining us on the session today. And I think, as you guys at home can probably tell, we have a very tech-focused episode today, and it's going to be really exciting hearing about probably one of the most important technologies in recent memory when it comes to the financial services industry. So if I could come to you, Chris, straight away and kind of look at what some of the opportunities are for financial services organizations, maybe like yourselves, to adopt cloud and maybe why it set you apart from the traditional financial players and then maybe slower approach.
Yeah, so I haven't validated this statement, but I kind of wonder if something like Mojo would even be existing if it wasn't for the kind of cloud systems. I tend to refer to them sometimes in work as kind of force multipliers, and the kind of days probably, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago. Like I remember I was doing a data center move back in about 2014, 2016, something like that. So people were still heavily using data centers back then, but to go and get some data center space and get it all set up and the racks and networking, etc., was obviously quite a big endeavor. And I think what the kind of the cloud systems has allowed us to do is to kind of have like very small teams focused on problems and very much self-serve, so they can spin up, an environment in seconds, which means that they can deploy to production, in one day if they want to start writing code, which is a huge power. I think a small business, it survives and thrives on its speed and ability to make decisions, as opposed to, kind of like I'm sure Wayne will talk a little bit about NatWest. It's a big behemoth. It's got heavyweight power. If it moves into a market, it can cause you lots of problems, and the only kind of advantage you've got is your agility. And then I suppose about the traditional financial players being slow to do so. Again, I'll probably look back at my own kind of history here, is that, people are traditionally against, we'll have to punch a hole in a firewall to try and connect a data center to a cloud system, et cetera, and you've got red tape, you've got security issues, I suppose, that could start to happen. And I suppose it's just that legacy, which all businesses have, not just banking, financial players, that it kind of keeps you kind of in your traditional remit, whereas the kind of, like I say, the kind of fresher, younger organizations, they don't have that legacy, so can kind of just jump into the kind of modern technology stacks, and allows them to do so, which is why the traditional players have been a bit slow, perhaps.
Yeah, well, Wayne, I've got to then throw it to you, because you sit in that perfect middle ground, effectively, of having that power of the institution behind you, but then, as you mentioned in your own words, I think that kind of startup mentality too, right?
Yeah, it's a really interesting challenge. I think, trying to transform huge organizations' financial platform systems, many of which may have been live for 40 plus years. This is obviously no trivial task. And I think, I think we've also realized that taking those platforms and potentially lifting and shifting into the cloud just doesn't maximize the value, doesn't deliver the operational benefit you'd want, and certainly doesn't even come close to helping with any costs. And I think it's, but also all of the regulation, all of the compliance, all of the security, privacy aspects that come with it also need a rethink. And it's very difficult to do that at absolutely massive scale. And I think in Mettle, I feel very privileged that we've had the opportunity to start in a relatively greenfield way, learn from, all of the experience from the bank, whilst actually being able to build a banking platform and product cloud natively from the ground up, has definitely been, a huge benefit to us.
Yeah. I think that's absolutely brilliant, to kind of it enables that kind of greenfield approach, that ability to start again from the ground up. So I think that's going to be critical, I think, going throughout this conversation. And Paulo, if I could also come to you, if we get all three of your opinions on this question, because I think it's quite an important one to kick this session off. What do you see as some of the opportunities when it comes to cloud systems in finance?
Yeah, there's definitely two sort of trend or kind of ends on the spectrum, really. You've got your traditional business models, which typically are quite slow to adopt due to transformation change. And obviously that is quite drawn out. It's quite a process within the internal business itself. And then obviously the guys with Wayne and Chris, they're quite dynamic, which is obviously a key word to use, where they're able to adapt to certain technologies coming through. In particular, when it comes to security, there's a lot of concerns out there in the marketplace right now. How do you protect your data? Where's your data kept, for example? So there's two major sort of ends of such, and it's just trying to prioritize what's going to work as such. So I suppose, typically running legacy equipment in a traditional model, which again is quite common in financial institutions within the UK, IT teams can find it a bit of a hassle to migrate systems to cloud without a centralized team. So hence with the likes of ourselves, for example, we often get involved in those sort of projects and sort of work with the digital journey, so to speak. So trying to combine the two, again, ends of the spectrum, really.
Yeah, and if I could come to you, Chris, a sec then as well, because we've heard from Paulo there, it's a journey, but one keyword that you mentioned was the kind of scalability, and I think, is it fair to say that scalability maybe for you guys is the core and the key, the KPI behind using cloud? Has it enabled you guys to really go on and compete in an industry with behemoths?
Yeah, I suppose it is. I don't know if it's a key one, but it's certainly a key one, you know what I mean? So there might be some other things, but yeah, it's allowed us to, like I say, we can build something, and, you know, we know that if overnight we became a huge success, that it automatically scales nicely, you know. There's a security element of it as well. I think, you know, I'm not saying you get a lot of things out the box with going to a cloud-based solution, but the patterns are very well established. You can kind of follow them, and things like, I certainly don't claim to be a networking engineer, you know, but I can network, you know, AWS cloud, you know what I mean? We can network, you know, boxes between each other and follow ACLs, etc., to be able to keep things secure. So I certainly think, you know, without the cloud, like say, I don't know where we would be.
Yeah. It's interesting you bring that up, and Paulo, if I could come to you as well, then, you know, we've heard about scalability, we've heard about also security. I mean, those are things in such a regulated industry like finance, banking. It's incredible how stern these regulations are, and to find, do you think that cloud provides that middle ground of being able to scale while also adhering to some of those regulations and security issues that we find in finance?
Yeah, definitely. Obviously, again, referring to Chris and Wayne, obviously they're part of the whole startup within the fintech industry. I mean, the growth of fintech and as a business may obviously purely rely on scalability in terms of onboarding new customers and growing the business as such, where I suppose, again, leaning on traditional financial institutions, which are a bit more stable. Again, I suppose your startups need to be a bit more dynamic to react in terms of what's actually happening within the markets, and being able to do so quickly is obviously fundamental to the business. So in that respect, being able to scale out, whether it be horizontally on your servers or vertically, that's obviously paramount and obviously important to the business. So I'd definitely say it's definitely key within the marketplace.
Interesting. Now, Wayne, with that in mind, then, do you know, as I mentioned, the critical issue in banking and finance is to be as secure as possible. We're dealing with people's very sensitive data. So do you think that cloud-based systems are safer than on-prem systems now? I know traditionally a lot of the typical high street institutions have liked to do everything in-house, but maybe is that a different kind of ecosystem now?
So I think this is a really interesting question. Are cloud-based systems more secure than on-prem ones? I guess it just depends on how they're built. I think they are, fundamentally, it's a completely different paradigm. Hosting your applications or your platforms in the public cloud means it's actually accessible could be accessible by any computer on the planet. How you architect appropriately, what tools you use, what partners you use, and how you secure your interactions with these partners, all of those things are really important. I think there is a huge paradigm shift, and if architected properly, I think we've now seen that actually it can be safer than on-prem systems. I think that we're moving from a world where security has a focus on building very high walls around something, where once you get over that high wall, you have access to the crown jewels. Many organizations, much like ours, follow a zero trust security model where every single interaction is authenticated and authorized, which just we believe just gives us considerable more security strength in depth.
Yeah, it's an interesting way to look at it. It's almost like every cloud isn't built equal. You've got to look at every different tangible approach to it. And Chris, I'm going to come to you for the next question. But so Paulo, if I could jump back to you for this, do you agree that cloud-based systems, and it's actually the way that you build them and the way that partnership is created, that is the strength to how secure these systems are?
Yeah, definitely. Obviously, there's a number of sort of add-ons that you can integrate within your environment itself. I mean, traditionally, you normally just have firewalls and then you've got all your add-ons around that. But as obviously Wayne mentioned, there's obviously good layers of authentication that you need to access your actual environment. So whether that's multi-factor authentication, utilizing various VPNs, making sure exactly where your data is hosted, for example, is a good example to start with. But again, there's a whole range of security suite measures that can be applied to keep data safe. And there's a big debate whether or not you go sort of private cloud versus public cloud in terms of those security aspects. And that's one key thing that I know a lot of CTOs sort of throw up and sort of bring to our attention at least. But also looking at private, there's also a lot of benefits. I mean, obviously there's physical security around your private cloud environments. You know exactly where it is. It's manned. It's within a secure data center. Whereas Wayne rightly said, it's all in the cloud. You may not necessarily know what data center it's in, but as long as you have all the safeguards in place, then you should be fine.
Yeah. Now, with that in mind, then that it kind of you've touched on really, I think what leads on to the next question perfectly. And Chris, if I could come to you with this, hearing about how much thought the CTO has to put into that, kind of designing that or looking where that's partnered. Is it fair to say, and I love the fact that I'm coming to you with this question, is it fair to say that CTOs, maybe even CIOs, are actually becoming the most important execs at banks or financial services companies nowadays?
100%, because I have to say that from my next pay rise review. No, but in all seriousness, I think we've definitely left a world where technology was seen as a cost, and it's now seen as kind of say an enabler or something that can help become a business competitive advantage. So whether they're the most important is probably a debate that we could raise forever, but there's an increasing importance which is growing, I imagine, every year.
Yeah. Now, Wayne, also, could I get you to weigh on that? Obviously, with by the same token, maybe it's not the most important, but it's as we've heard, it is increasingly becoming far more important now, because not only does it have those security issues to think about, the CTO now actually has all these brilliant new technologies that can enable new services and new products for your customers. Would you agree that that lends itself to an increasingly important role, in the C-suite?
Definitely. I actually echo all that Chris said, all of it. I think it's definitely a pivotal role now in enabling the organizations to serve our customers. Our customers have ever-growing expectations from what they want from their service. But we also, as we've talked about already, I think we need to importantly keep their money and their data safe and private. But the important thing for us, I think, is particularly at Mettle, customers at the center of everything that we do, every way we think about it. So, we need to serve their needs through technology, whether that's apps or websites that they interact with, or the services they support. And I think in order to delight them with their experience, I have to work very closely with the Chief Product Officer, the Chief Operations Officer, the Chief Marketing Officer at Mettle. And I think, and our organizations actually culturally are much more entwined. Product and engineering are, matrix that they work together, and they both own the customer experience, the features we're building, but all of the strengthening, hardening, the security, privacy, resilience, scalability kind of considerations as well. And I think those things together are really important.
Yeah. Now, with that in mind, then, it's almost become the heart of the web within the company, because everything touches technology nowadays, as you guys have mentioned. Now, one thing that has certainly been at the heart of the web for a lot of financial services organizations has been open banking, payment services directive, that opening up of data. So Chris, if I could ask you, do you think that cloud technology has been also a key enabler to allowing open banking to thrive in the UK in a way that maybe it probably wouldn't have thrived without?
Yeah, I do. Again, I think Wayne probably perhaps knows better than me the tech underneath it's whether how the data is actually kind of being surfaced. But I suppose it's the people who are kind of consuming that and building on top of that are providing the solutions to the customers. And again, I imagine they're predominantly cloud-based. So I suppose if cloud wasn't around and people were still doing data centers, would the uptake have been of quick in businesses? My gut feelings it probably wouldn't have. But again, I think I'll let Wayne answer regarding the other side of the fence, shall I say?
Yeah.
I think if you look at it as a problem, I think decentralized, scalable systems are probably the only feasible way for banks and other financial institutions to be able to realize the benefit actually presented by open banking, and I think in order to do that, it's about the flexibility, the speed of change, which Chris actually talked about. We build and ship features, every day now into cloud environments. I don't think that was possible before. There's obviously a need to have a home for this vast amount of data, and data in all of the institutions moving in lots of different directions. And actually going back to the security and safety point again, I think 5 years ago, the regulators, maybe some of the industry bodies, and certainly the companies weren't sure that it's the most safe and secure way of doing things. But actually, I think we've all got to the point now where that's changed. So I think all of those things coming together has actually created the opportunity that is now open banking.
Yeah. Oh, well, I think that's absolutely brilliant to hear. We hear so much about open banking and some of the regulations that have enforced this openness, but actually, that technology behind it has also been key throughout. And it's absolutely brilliant to hear that. And I'm sure a lot of small to medium-sized businesses, the ability to move quickly in that regard and have all that data shared must be such a time-saving bonus, which for them must be everything. Now, Wayne, you've been bringing up that security element as well, and I think there's one thing that maybe some of the traditional institutions have always feared about opening up their data. So Paulo, if I could ask you, as the finance industry changes to become more open, what are some of the new vulnerabilities FIs now face from this open ecosystem?
I suppose that the major thing we come across quite often is obviously your protection of data and how you go about protecting it. Obviously, a lot of the data is highly sensitive, and obviously within that, that attracts a number of cyber criminals that have unique ways of trying to target that particular data set.
Yeah.
But I suppose technology and sort of software flaws are the main things in terms of it affects every industry, not just the financial sector really. But when working with a cloud provider, such as I suppose someone like ourselves, any other cloud provider out there, I suppose you can be assured that servers are provisioned correctly in the first instance when set up. They're monitored correctly. You're eradicating any risks around vulnerabilities later down the line. And of course, there's sort of small things you can do, ensuring that obviously regular patches and updates are applied to your machines, for example. There's other sort of security flaws, such as there could be certain attacks like DDoS, which is obviously something that not necessarily every company may think of, but it's obviously definitely a contributing factor in terms of affecting your platform out there. And also data breaches are becoming increasingly sort of common. So it's trying to mitigate against these sort of issues that we do come across. And there's a number of solutions that can be put in place, such as sort of data encryption, making sure that your files are all configured correctly, that you're locking down ports. You've also got VPN access for multi-factor authentication. There's web application firewalls and stuff like that. So very similar to earlier in the conversation when we were talking about building from the ground up, just making sure that you've got all those security aspects built in, which would definitely help your overall cause. But obviously, not only just talking about sort of a hardware and application layer, there's also, I suppose, an individual where you've got a sense of human error. And again, this may stem down from the likes of CTOs and CIOs, where attackers out there obviously find it quite easy to hack humans, so to speak. So more so staff and clients of the particular business. And obviously that's more so exploiting the lack of knowledge or training within the business. So the particular attackers could also use technology to trick employees with, for example, phishing emails, banking malware, stuff like that. So I suppose it's all about improving awareness within the business itself. And that obviously stems from the top down, making sure that obviously the workforce is educated to a degree to avoid these sort of issues that we are coming across more and more. And those attackers obviously focusing on that to sort of, I think.
Yeah, you've touched on a really interesting point there in the fact that we've spent so long of this conversation looking at the tech aspect, but it actually goes beyond that, because it's gotten to the point where no longer is the tech the weakest point. It's now, it almost seems sad to say that the human element, as you were saying, is just as vulnerable, if not more so. You get that email sent from your boss at 5 o'clock on a Friday evening. You're not gonna think too much about it, and it's a shame that it's got to that point. So, I mean, Chris, if I could come to you and ask then, about this kind of two-pronged approach, this human approach and the kind of tech approach. How do you find that middle ground, and does that still play into the CTO's role of having to look at that training of the human side as well, to kind of coexist with the tech aspect and improving the security on the tech aspect, but also the human side?
Yeah, I think it does. I suppose there's probably no other person better prepared for some of that stuff, to be able to run people through some of that training. And likewise, I think it depends on your organization. We'll have like L&D consultants and, people in HR, for instance, who might run some of the training. So it's definitely like a bit of a team thing. And likewise around the tech, I think, things like that I mentioned before, the patterns, etc., that already exist. I think Amazon tend to use like opt-out security, etc. So you're automatically covered unless you decide to make it so to open ports, etc. So I think it's getting easier and easier to kind of protect your vulnerable systems. So yeah, the training part becomes necessarily much more important because attackers know that, so spend more time attacking the weakest link.
Yeah. Now, with that in mind, we've talked a bit about open banking and that ability to kind of adapt and share data in a better way. But obviously, one of the biggest part of open banking is the fact that now, by sharing data, you can actually partner with other organizations in far more effective ways. And those old, traditional institutions can move in really quite rapid ways now. And then also the smaller organizations can vice versa pair with huge organizations as well. So Wayne, can I ask, do you think that by using cloud-based technology, organizations in finance have actually been able to partner in quicker ways? Because I'm pretty sure a lot of the kind of cycles of these partnerships maybe 10 years ago would have been a couple of years at least, right?
Yeah, completely. I think I think it's been one of the key benefits of the advent of the cloud, to be honest. There are a huge number, and growing every day, companies which provide SaaS offerings where they have built their offering around the thing they really understand, they're experts at. Maybe it's identity checking or document checking, whether it's passports, driver's license, or maybe it's credit reference checking services. They enable customers to interact with them with kind of standardized API-based interfaces. And for organizations like us, they're absolutely fundamental, because building all of that capability ourselves, essentially building, a whole bank with everything that you must do, would be an undertaking that would take us probably decades. So we can leverage the absolute best in class at any point in time, partner to do the thing we need them to do, and importantly, we can revise and change our minds over time and use different partners or different combinations for resilience sometimes if we wanted to. But I think it's a huge advantage of the world we're in now.
Yeah, and I think that's quite exciting, because in this world, I've left this kind of bringing up the elephant in the room to the very end. Obviously we've had the pandemic, and that's changed the way that people can now interact. You can't just go to someone's offices and kind of hash out a plan to kind of collaborate. So I mean, Paulo, before we move on to discussing the pandemic and the tech around that and the shifting digitization we've seen in finance, can I ask you, Paulo, how you've seen partnerships change due to cloud-based technology before we jump into the pandemic?
I suppose there's a big emphasis in terms of being able to access from anywhere, anytime, on any device within the cloud itself. Obviously, as we bring up the pandemic, obviously that's been quite vital in recent times, which obviously then makes collaboration much easier, especially if you're running a hybrid workforce, so to speak. So I definitely think it's key. And obviously, just touching on what Wayne said, obviously there's a lot of SaaS platforms out there that obviously you can leverage those particular partnerships to help facilitate growth. And it sounds like the likes of Chris and Wayne have obviously made that work, and it's helped them grow significantly over time. So it's great to see that that's happening in the marketplace, and it's great to see companies are sort of sorting those platforms out.
Yeah, it does seem to be exponentially increasing on that kind of partnership side, despite the pandemic. And Chris, if I come to you and talk about how maybe the pandemic, if it was, the question I always want to ask is, what would financial services have looked like if the pandemic had hit 10 years previous? It would have been absolutely a different equation. So do you think that the state of cloud-based technology enabled financial services organizations to really, I don't want to use the word thrive, but survive and really power through the pandemic?
Yeah, I think they do. So again, one of the first things that I did when I joined Mojo was, kind of review all the documents, think about things, and so you come across your BCP, so business continuity planning, and actually, I was trying to write it in my head, because the second you've got a cloud-based system that's kind of, across multiple AZs, across multiple regions, we're a remote first workplace, not workspace.
That's for the next decade, the workspace instead of workplace.
Yeah. No, I'm the fourth billionaire in the battle with it. I was like, actually, I don't really know what could kind of take down the business at this moment in time from a kind of resiliency perspective because of that. So I was like, right, there might be something like a nationwide power cut, because obviously we're geographically dispersed. And I was like, actually, if there's a nationwide power cut, I can't imagine many people are going to be worrying about booking a mortgage. So yeah, I think, the cloud-based stuff, I think, remote work, again, is a slight take off that as well, perhaps. I think gives all business and especially financial institutions the ability to kind of grapple with anything that kind of gets thrown at them, perhaps.
Interesting. And Wayne, if we could start to wrap up with you here and looking at that resiliency through cloud, do you echo what Chris was saying?
Oh, completely. I was just thinking about those kind of dark days in March last year when it was clearer that a lockdown was about to happen, and as CTO, I was obviously concerned about how we would even work, and because of our reliance on cloud technologies and SaaS platforms, not just to host and serve our customers, but actually for all of our productivity tools, it was actually pretty clear that it wouldn't be, practically much of a problem. And in fact, we transitioned over the course of those few days, and just carried on. Obviously, people missed the interaction, but there was no interruption in any of our service to our customers, and actually there was a measurable increase in our productivity for a few weeks, probably while people were focused on this, on not thinking about the pandemic. But that would have been absolutely impossible a few years ago. I think it would have been devastating, actually.
Wow. I mean, with that in mind, I think we are coming up to time, guys, but it's been absolutely incredible having the three of you on today's session. It's been really exciting. Kind of, you hear the technology bandied about a lot, but to actually hear the use cases that all three of you have brought up and put it into tangible terms, someone that is not technologically, classically trained, has been absolutely brilliant to hear. So thank you so much. And if I could just do a round robin before we head off, if where people can find out a bit more about your organizations and maybe yourselves on any social handle. If I could kick off with you, Paulo, where can people find you, and what are you guys working on at Hyve?
So the best place is obviously reach out to us. You can have a look at our website first of all, which is hyve.com. In terms of product stacks, we cover a range of private cloud, enterprise cloud, colocation services across the globe. So feel free to check us out. That's
amazing. Thank you so much, Paulo. And Chris, also, where can people find out more about Mojo and yourself?
Yeah, it's just mojomortgages.com. If you're looking for a mortgage, I'm always going to recommend that, building customer owned broker experiences. And then for myself, I'm on LinkedIn, Chris Thacker, not the most common name, and then Twitter, it's Chris Thacker 66.
Amazing. And lastly, Wayne, thank you very much for joining. Could you tell us a bit more about Mettle and where people can find you?
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. Mettle.co.uk is the place to look, and LinkedIn is the best place for me.
Perfect. Guys, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure. And also to all our viewers, thank you so much for watching. You can catch the rest of the series and much more over at www.fintechf.com, and of course YouTube and LinkedIn, where I'll see you in the comments. So once again, guys, thank you very much and goodbye.